Taiwan's semiconductor industry made headlines around the world after TSMC announced a $100 billion investment plan to supplement its operations in Arizona. The fact that this includes the chip company's first U.S. R&D facilities has fired up a fierce debate about Taiwan maintaining its competitive edge. So what's next for Taiwan's semiconductor industry, and how will it keep its global lead in advanced chips? I'm Divya Gopalan, and this is Connected. Well, to help us make sense of the changes on the horizon for the chip industry, we are joined today by Kristy Xu, Director at the Chung-Hua Institution for Economic Research in Taipei, and Dan Nystedt, who is a research analyst with TriOrient Investments in Taipei, which focuses on technology in Taiwan, Hong Kong, and Singapore. Thank you both so much for continuing this conversation. Now, Kristy, in a nutshell, why is Taiwan so critical for the global supply chain when it comes to semiconductors?
For Taiwan, most industries have outsourced their manufacturing to Southeast Asia or China in the past 2, 3, 4 decades, with only very few exemptions. And semiconductor supply chain is one of the very few exemptions. And the reason is it's difficult for Taiwan to move outside Taiwan for building fabrication, and also for doing R&D support, not only because of Taiwan keep its supply chain, also the so-called ecosystem here, but also because Taiwan has the most talents and also well-trained engineers to do all this kind of work in Taiwan. So, and also Taiwan wants to keep very high yield rates. So the best way for Taiwan is to control all this manufacturing, all this fabrication, testing, packaging here in Taiwan. So that's the very much background for Taiwan's semiconductor supply chain maintaining Taiwan. And in the past years, though there are a number of companies outsource their production outside Taiwan, but Taiwan continue to be the most important base. For example, the data of 2022 suggests that around 92% of chips, Taiwan's total chip production, was still in Taiwan. Only about 8% was outsourced in a neighboring country. So having said that, that kind of strong position for Taiwan will continue to maintain. But in the future, this share may decline because right now we have expanded supply chain to other countries. But as we just discussed earlier, I don't think that is going to affect Taiwan's strong position, especially in terms of advanced chips here in this island.
Right. So speaking of Taiwan's strong position, the U.S. is Taiwan's biggest customer, I believe, Dan, and correct me if I'm wrong. But U.S. companies have the same access to the critical technology that's ASML's EUV lithography machines, which are needed for manufacturing advanced chips. So why hasn't the U.S. been able to ramp up its production to meet its needs?
It probably has mostly to do with national policy. In the U.S., there's definitely a preference by engineers to go into the chip design side, and as opposed to manufacturing. There is still a lot of manufacturing in the U.S. It's not something that you can't do in the U.S. or that's way too expensive for the U.S. The most expensive thing in a fab is the manufacturing equipment, and the U.S. is actually the #1 fab equipment maker in the world. So all of that definitely can be done in the U.S., but Taiwan's been very policy friendly towards semiconductors. There's a lot of tax exemptions. There's a lot of help. There's it's great having a one-stop shop in the science parks so that anybody who wants to invest can come in and get it set up pretty quickly. It's already a mature semiconductor manufacturing location, which means there are gases, there are chemicals, there's all kinds of engineering support that's needed to have a semiconductor industry. All those things are already here, and frankly, all those things are available in the U.S. as well. So, and as you said, getting access to the fab equipment is also easy in the U.S. What's been missing is before the CHIPS Act went into effect, there wasn't really a strong push to have more manufacturing in the U.S. And if you were building a fab, it made a lot more sense to build in Taiwan or China or South Korea, where you frankly, you have a lot of great government incentives, and it made a lot more sense economically to do those things out here. And it doesn't, and that's why now with the CHIPS Act in the U.S., it does make more sense to build there, because even the what grabs the headlines is the grants. When I think TSMC got 6.8 billion or roughly as a grant for their initial investment in the U.S., the 65 billion investment in the U.S. But really what will save them a lot more money is the tax incentives, because there's a lot of tax breaks involved. And that's actually a bigger portion from where I'm sitting and looking at it than the grants are themselves, because those last for years, for decades. So a lot of that stuff, you don't necessarily see it, but the Taiwan government's done a great job of setting up the policy so that it really attracted a lot of investment here, and it really encouraged Taiwan companies to keep investing here. It's a tough place to compete with when it comes to chip manufacturing and having a good environment for it.
Absolutely. Those tax incentives and grants and those behind the scenes moving of money often are not talked about or seen very much. But let's talk about how Taiwan's been capitalizing on that. Taiwan was responsible for 77% of global foundry revenue in 2024. But Taiwan isn't only prominent in fabrication. It is, in fact, responsible for over half the market for packaging and testing, a crucially important step in making chips usable. And also Taiwan has made significant inroads in the other end. It is the second biggest country for chip design, behind only the United States. Now, Dan, can you just very briefly explain the concept of packaging and how that plays into the semiconductor production?
Sure. Packaging is one of those parts of the industry that I think for a long time people thought was a bit boring. And now it's gotten a whole new life, because it's one of the key ways to really drive computing performance forward. So what a package is very simple. What TSMC does is it fabricates the actual chip itself. So what you see coming off the line of a TSMC production line is actually about a dinner-sized plate, what's called a silicon wafer, and they've already etched the chips into that. And then those chips are going to be cut out of that wafer, and then they will be put inside of a package. And now the reason it has to go inside something else is because if even a speck of dust gets on that chip, it's ruined. So we joked around during COVID, if you were in chip manufacturing, you were actually in the safest place in the world, because there's nothing cleaner than the inside of a chip fab. So, I mean, even a surgical room, it doesn't even come close to how clean it is inside of a chip fab. So, and that's why the packaging is so important. So it has to go into that, and then it goes inside of an electronic device. So there are connectors inside the package that connect to the chip, and then will connect from the chip to the device, and that's what runs the device. So that's the key to packaging in general. And then in particular, the more advanced packaging, Taiwan or TSMC's CoWoS, C-O-W-O-S, is quite famous, because that's really what's been taken up for a lot of the AI chips that are coming out. It really it's a new way to move computing power forward, and it's something that the industry is probably would have been nice if the industry had started doing a little bit earlier, but there's just not as much money in the packaging side, and there is now, because of this desire to really get speed for AI. So that's one of the really nice things that's happened because of AI, is just a lot of companies are willing to just pour money into the semiconductor industry, and it's given new life to older technologies that like packaging. And silicon photonics is another thing that's it's been around for a while, but now you have a data center and people are willing to pay lots of money to get this technology into the fab, because it's going to save you some time, or it's going to increase your performance, or it's going to reduce the amount of energy you use. All these things, all these problems are being solved by this right now.
Kristy, Dan, yes, please jump in.
Yeah, I would like to add a bit on to Dan's remark that test and packaging is very, very important, especially for advanced test and packaging, where only probably TSMC and very few other companies can do that. And what makes the $100 billion investment even more strategically important is TSMC plans to build two factories for test and packaging in Arizona. And that will complete the whole supply chain in the US, because previously, while TSMC together with its 30-some suppliers already made decision to invest in the U.S., but there's no test and packaging. We interviewed some of the largest company here, including ASE, why they do not even think about going to the U.S. for doing testing packaging. It's because of this labor law, because testing packaging is very labor intensive work, and also it requires all this water or this electricity. So it's very challenging and not appropriate or commercially viable to move testing packaging over to the U.S. So TSMC now plans to have these two factories, meaning that they will test and package their own advanced chip. I think they will complete this supply chain in the U.S. because otherwise the TSMC will have to ship all the way of its advanced chips back to Taiwan, have it test and package, and then send back to the U.S. And that is just doesn't make sense at all.
Right, Kristy. I know this is a region you might have your eye on now. When we come to talk about competition in the packaging and marketing or testing sector, Taiwan's ASE Technology Holding, which is the world's largest chip packaging and testing company, opened its largest overseas operations in Malaysia. Now, given that it doesn't need, I'd assume it doesn't need the exact, I would say, the elements in R&D that you would need for advanced chips. Can you see that being the next big thing, as Dan mentioned, as more focus goes on AI and what AI needs?
I think it can be divided into two different trends. One for very advanced chips fabrication, and also other supply chain move to US, and probably the next step will be in Japan. There are also another trend of investment from Taiwan moving to Southeast Asia, including in Singapore, including in Malaysia, and probably Vietnam and Thailand may become an emerging destination for Taiwan's semiconductor supply chain. But that very much focused on mature chips for automobile, for EV, etc. And you mentioned about ASE. ASE just opened its expansion in Malaysia to support Malaysia now become a very important hub for chip production and also for testing packaging. So not only ASE but also other companies are moving towards Malaysia. I think that Southeast Asia alone will become a very important hub for mature chips together with fabrication, probably in Singapore, in Malaysia, and testing and packaging in other neighboring countries, and also IC design, because some ASEAN countries have rolled out its policy or its principle to encourage more investment from foreign countries to develop their fabrication and also IC design, testing, packaging.
Okay, I'm so glad you brought up design. So how important is design to Taiwan's economy? Well, Taiwan Semiconductor Industry Association estimated Taiwan's chip industry as a whole generated $596 billion in total revenue in 2024. And of that, 62% was predicted to be in chip manufacturing, mostly foundry and memory production. And chip design actually made up 25%. And that includes everything from mobile processors to communication chips. In fact, 3 of the world's 10 largest chip design houses last year were from Taiwan, with powerhouse MediaTek coming just behind America's AMD. Now, Dan, we focus so much on TSMC. Can you tell us about some of these other big players that are featuring on the global stage here?
Sure, absolutely. Most people are familiar with MediaTek. It's one of the world's largest makers of smartphone chips, and they've also done some they've made very interesting moves recently. They've started designing chips for other companies, which is also a very good business that pretty much started through the foundry industry, and a lot of Taiwan companies are in that business. Another one is called Global Unit Chip. And essentially what these companies do is, one of the most famous is Alt-Chip. I can't not talk about Alt-Chip. What they essentially do is, if you need a chip made for almost any reason, you can go to one of these companies and they can literally make the entire design for you. And what their original business, and one of the reasons they set up in the first place, was to help companies tweak the design of their chips to work on TSMC's manufacturing lines. So, and then they were able to from that, start working on other kinds of chips, and then became complete chip maker, complete chip design solutions for any company. So Divya, if you wanted a smartphone chip for yourself that was named after you, you could do that. A Taiwan company could help you design it. They would take it to TSMC and have it manufactured. It could be packaged at one of the Taiwan companies, and it would be done. And all you would need for that is money. And then, of course, it would be good if you had an end product for it. Otherwise, you're just wasting your money. But I mean, that's literally how kind of automated the industry is, and how much expertise there is. So on the design side, those are some key companies. One of the other companies that's in the top 10 you mentioned, Novatech, does mostly display chips, and then Realtek, which does a lot of networking chips, including Wi-Fi chips. They're both those companies are quite famous. They're quite well known. So, but that's not all there is. There's a lot of very interesting companies in Taiwan. Yeah.
Oh, Dan, don't go putting ideas in my head. All I need is a billionaire backer now. I have lots of ideas. Practicality, though, is a whole other conversation. Kristy, speaking of smartphone chipsets, Taiwan's MediaTek is already the world's largest chip designer by volume. But how would you say it competes or compares to, say, US's Qualcomm or Apple, which dominate currently?
I believe there is still a gap, but Media has come in very strong in terms of its flexibility. It try to serve as many important customers as possible. I think that will be the strength for Media, especially Media is now in Taiwan. It's working with other fabricators and also other test and packaging company, and also the application part is also Taiwan is also very strong. So I think Media, compared with these other companies, IC design house, Media has a very special and different advantages.
Right, Dan, according to reports, MediaTek could soon launch its own computer chips for Windows PC, both alone and in collaboration with Nvidia. Is this some kind of a milestone, and what other milestones do you see when it comes to Taiwan's chip design?
Well, in terms of it being a milestone, I'm not sure it's a major milestone. MediaTek is already making chips for smartphones, and what's happening in the industry is a lot of the technology that's in a smartphone is being used in computers. It's lower, it's a little bit lower power, but it's also more energy efficient. And that's kind of one of the directions things are going. Obviously, one of the key reasons to do that is for laptop computers. So if you can have a laptop computer that battery lasts like a smartphone does, where you can go days and days without having to recharge it, is one of the reasons that whole trend started. So MediaTek is one of the companies that's in that. Qualcomm is one of MediaTek's biggest rivals in smartphones. Qualcomm's also doing a chip like that, and so are other companies. So but it's an interesting part of the industry to get into, but partly because Taiwan is so big in laptop computers. So if MediaTek gets in, then their connections in Taiwan are one really good way for them to move forward in that, because Quanta Computer and Compal Electronics are two of the biggest laptop makers in the world. So being right in the middle of the supply chain is a massive advantage.
You know, Kristy and Dan, and I'm sure you know better than anyone else, before the pandemic, talking about semiconductors was not so much in the mainstream, but, it was really the pandemic shortages of chips and the delayed production of cars, electronics, and many other products, which really brought attention to the semiconductor industry. And much of that shortfall was in so-called legacy chips, though. But recent investments are not expected to increase the US's share in mature chips, while China, though, has been steadily adding capacity. So let's listen to Chris Miller, who's the author of the book Chip War. He recently visited Taipei and explained why this could pose a problem for the global supply chain.
We've already seen a number of instances, very well documented, of Western companies declining to invest more in legacy chip production because they were afraid if they did invest more, they wouldn't make any money given Chinese pricing. That's exactly the opposite dynamic of what we'd like to see. We'd like to see more investment in friendly countries so we weren't as reliant on China, but we're seeing the opposite.
Now, this is a question to both of you, and I'll start with you, Kristy. What do we know about China's chip manufacturing right now? As we saw in the AI sector and other technological developments, a lot of it is kept in the dark for those of us who aren't in the industry, and then suddenly we're surprised by something. So what do you know about it, Kristy?
Of course, semiconductor and also AI has been the focus for China for decades, especially now they do see the opportunity for China to come up with an AI with the AI development, and therefore I think they are trying to take advantage of the opportunity to negotiate with Trump government, so that Trump's government's export control and also other restrictions towards China may produce more flexibility for them. But regardless, China has its own market. For example, its Asian market and also Middle East market. So I think China will continue to develop its market position in these different places, and also enhance its production, and also development, and also R&D in China.
What's your take on this, Dan?
A lot of things are automated now. A lot of the production line equipment can be set up just about anywhere. And really, as long as you have a stable electricity supply and you're in an area where hopefully there's not too many earthquakes or other problems, you can set up a semiconductor industry. It's just, it takes time in the initial stage, it takes more time and more money. So what China's doing, it seems like they want self-sufficiency in semiconductors. They'll probably get it. They have some real big hurdles to overcome in order to do that. And some of those hurdles are very difficult. There's one lithography machine from ASML that nobody else can make. If you don't have access to that, it's very hard to make the most modern AI chips. And right now, the level of chip production, it's not that advanced. There's a lot of headline news. Oh, China's done this and China's done that. They're at 7 nanometer. TSMC was at 7 nanometer in 2018, and TSMC was using the same equipment that China's using. TSMC had no advantage in 2018 with the equipment. In fact, China has the advantage because they're using equipment that is it's 2025, so 7 years older or 7 years more advanced, because all that machinery, every year it's updated, every year it's upgraded, every year they try to make it better and faster and smoother for the engineers. So China has that, and they're still not able to do something that TSMC did in 2018. Their yields are not that good. TSMC's yields were very good. This is not easy stuff to do. It's very difficult to do. So, when people get too upset about the military side of it, I try to remind them that, this is not that easy to do. And Taiwan has a massive advantage in that, just a massive advantage.
Yeah, you brought up ASML's dominance, which also astounds me that all of that lithography expertise is so concentrated in one place. But Kristy, I want to ask you, should Taiwan continue then in legacy chips? I mean, there are other places now, and maybe you could tell me some of those other places that are looking to make more legacy chips, which are more widely used in Asia. And in that case, does it make sense for Taiwan to continue its production of legacy chips?
Apart from TSMC, which now shifting to produce more advanced chips for their U.S. clients, a lot of other Taiwanese companies are still producing or doing testing and packaging for a legacy chip or mature chip. I was corrected by Europeans when I used the legacy chip. They don't like the idea. They don't like the term, so I'll use mature chips. So mature chip is still very important, a very big business for Taiwan. However, I think companies here understand that they have to move forward because there are so many newcomers, and also Taiwan right now is facing a lot of challenges. We are just not that competitive in terms of water, in terms of land, in terms of everything to produce mature chips to directly compete with China or other Southeast Asian countries. Yes, I think companies would very much like to move forward to get into this more advanced chip business. However, Dan already mentioned that TSMC is a great company. Probably it's one of the very unique company that can they have so much advantage, but that's not the case for most TSMC's suppliers, because most of these hundreds of suppliers are still small and medium-sized company, and these companies may not have the experiences and also the resources and also the talents to expand globally as TSMC is doing. Therefore, while we applaud TSMC's moving and expanding to other parts of the world, we still have to pay attention to many of its suppliers, mostly SME, and the government need to come up with policies to help this SME, not only for moving globally, but also for directly competing with new players in this market.
I can't thank you both enough for your time. But before I let you go, one final question. Start with you, Dan, with limits on how much more can fit into a single chip as they get smaller and smaller. What would you say you're looking forward to in the next big thing in semiconductors?
One of the things I'm looking forward to, I mentioned earlier, is called silicon photonics, which is essentially inside of a chip, messages or data is transferred using electrical signals, electricity, particles of electricity that are called electrons. And what silicon photonics does is takes the data and puts it on light. It uses light instead, because you can send a lot more data over light than you can over electricity, and you can do it with, it's a bit less energy efficient, or it's more energy efficient, uses less energy is what I was about to go for. And that, to me, that's one of the most exciting things that's happening. And it's just something that's expensive. And now all the money that's going into data centers has made that money available so that those expenses aren't so bad, and that you can do a little more R&D and expect to actually earn a little money off it instead of making a loss. So I think over the next few years, to me, that's one of the things that's really interesting.
And Kristy, what have you got your eye on in the semiconductor industry as we move forward, whether it's the way we do business or technology?
I believe the AI boom is helping Taiwan a lot, not only in terms of producing an AI chip, but also AI servers, which is right now a very important business. And also all these big technology company, Nvidia, AMD, right now, they are building, for example, supercomputer data center or R&D centers in Taiwan. I think that has enabled Taiwan to build a trusted partnership with all these large companies to cope with the AI boom. I think that will be a very important development, both for Taiwan and also for this, for working closer with these very important companies in the future.
Kristy Xu from the Chung-Hua Institution for Economic Research and Dan Nystedt from TriOrient Investments. I can't thank you enough for your time and your insight. It was fantastic to talk to you about this. Really appreciate it. So, will Taiwan ever rival the US as a chip design powerhouse? And what do you think is in store for semiconductors in Taiwan? If you're watching on YouTube, share your thoughts in the comments section. And don't forget to subscribe and hit the notification bell. And click the video next to me to watch our guests explain whether Taiwan indeed has a monopoly on chips and what to expect from TSMC's investment in the US.